Welcome to reality. You're now on the Code of Mind channel. If you examine the archival photographs of major global cities from the mid-19th century, places like Paris or New York, you will see incredible monumental vistas, luxurious architecture, perfectly paved streets, and vast plazas. But the moment you look closely at the details, you are struck by a strange feeling. These cities are absolutely empty. There are no crowds, no merchants, no carriages on the vast boulevards. Just endless, silent scenery. Official history waves this away with a shrug, claiming it's a limitation of early daguerreotype photography. They say the exposure time was between 10 to 30 minutes, so people moving through the streets were simply blurred out and vanished from the frame, unable to be captured on film. The explanation seems logical, but is it really? Yes, occasionally you might spot a single, blurred silhouette of someone standing perfectly still in the corner of a frame. But where is everyone else? Where are the massive urban crowds? If the exposure time was so long, why are trees, whose leaves sway in the wind, perfectly sharp? Why are there no dark patches on the plazas left by hundreds of supposedly passing pedestrians and horse-drawn carriages? The reality looks as if these majestic granite and marble cities, with their ready-to-use multi-story buildings, infrastructure, and streets, had already been rendered in perfect quality, but the users had not yet been logged in. The buildings stood ready, but they were uninhabited. The world was on pause. The system created the perfect set and was waiting for the moment when the server was ready for mass population. And this launch of a new generation began suddenly. And so we are left with the question, if the cities were empty but completely finished, where did millions of people appear from in an instant? Why, at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, did the planet face an anomalous wave of orphans? Official history attempts to blame this on endless epidemics, local wars, and extreme poverty. But if we count the total urban population of that time, the math of official history simply breaks. The percentage of orphans was so gigantic that it seems as if this generation of children never had parents at all. In a simulation, this is called forced map population, or the materialization of new users. These children were not born in the conventional sense. Their system code was uploaded to the matrix directly. This is precisely why strange pavilions began opening one after another on the streets of major cities, at international exhibitions, and in amusement parks. These facilities were called baby incubators. Their most famous operator, Dr. Martin County, spent 40 years exhibiting live infants in glass boxes as a spectacle, charging spectators 25 cents for admission. Hundreds of infants were kept in these displays simultaneously. We still have the advertising posters and photographs of massive buildings with infant incubator signs, where people stood in kilometer-long lines. Infants were brought there by the thousands from unknown sources. These were actual industrial factories for sorting, maturing, and distributing human material for the empty cities. The Matrix used these incubator stations as technical gateways to materialize millions of new users and physically distribute them into the very same empty, finished homes that had been waiting. If you think the idea of mass-producing humans is science fiction, let's look at the pop culture of that era. At the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th centuries, Europe was swept by a boom of illustrated postcards. The subjects of these cards today shock any thinking person. These weren't isolated drawings, they were produced in the millions. What did they depict? You can find these archival cards today. They show children in great detail literally hatching from giant chicken eggs in nests alongside chicks. Other cards show massive cabbage patches where infants appear en masse, and gardeners harvest them into baskets like ripe produce. There are scenes where storks don't just carry one baby in their beak, but whole flocks of these birds deliver infants on an industrial scale, dropping them by parachute directly onto city streets. On some posters, children are depicted inside automated factory conveyor belts. We are told this is just harmless holiday humor or old fairy tales for adults. But why was this humor so methodical, massive, and centered entirely on the theme of the artificial, unnatural origin of children outside of the family unit? The Matrix always leaves hints in the info field. When a massive system update is initiated, the consciousness of the old users must be prepared so they don't go insane from the sudden influx of millions of people appearing out of nowhere. Through these postcards and posters, a basic script was implanted into the collective subconscious. Babies come from incubators, from cabbages, from eggs. It is normal for a stork to bring them. Don't ask questions. Don't look for their parents. They were simply uploaded into the system. When this giant incubator generation grew up a little, the system needed to distribute them across the game map. The logistics had to be perfect. It was then, between 1854 and 1929, that a massive and fully documented event known as the orphan train movement was launched in the United States. Over these 75 years, special trains transported more than 250,000 orphans from major East Coast cities deep into the country to the wild and empty territories of the West. The trains stopped at provincial stations, the cars opened, the children were lined up on the platforms, and local residents from all over the area picked them out. A similar boom of homeless children from mysterious distribution centers occurred during those same years worldwide, including Europe. The main feature of this operation was the total destruction of roots. These hundreds of thousands of children were strictly ordered to permanently forget their past, their former names, and who their parents were. They were issued entirely new documents, given new surnames, and their identities were wiped clean. A new generation, grown without memory, without family archives, and without a connection to the past, was perfectly suited to populate the empty, ready-made houses and write the history of this world from a clean slate. The previous script of humanity had been completely reset. Let's try to calculate the exact moment the system pushed the restart button and began mass loading users into empty cities. If we compare historical markers, we see a perfect systemic timing. In 1839, Louis Daguerre officially introduced daguerreotypy, the first working technology for fixing an image. It is from this year, from the late 1830s and early 1840s, that the simulation begins to generate its first static images of empty streets. The cities are already there, but they are dead. Then, a key phase begins. From 1854, as we know, the orphan trains were officially launched. But why these specific years? It was critically important for the Matrix to fix the birth of the new world onto a digital or analog medium to create an illusion of a continuous past for the new generation. Before the invention of photography, history could be rewritten in text files. But in the mid-19th century, the system required irrefutable visual evidence. It began training new users to use cameras, creating pseudo-archives. All over the world, a massive boom in portrait photography started simultaneously. Millions of people lined up to photographers to get their first family portraits. If you look closely at the faces in photos from the end of the 19th century, they look extremely strange. Tense, frozen, as if they are seeing their own reflection in a three-dimensional world for the first time. Now, let's apply cold logic to the timelines. We are told that humanity has evolved on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years. Our era has lasted over 2,000 years. And throughout all those millennia, human life remained virtually unchanged. Candlelight, carts, horses, a lack of basic plumbing, hygienic darkness, and complete isolation of locations from one another. For centuries, people couldn't send a message to the next town faster than a horse could run. And suddenly, a historical paradox occurs. Within just 30 to 40 years after the launch of cinematography, humanity makes an unthinkable leap from total illiteracy and horse carts to mass television, radio broadcasting, nuclear weapons, and the creation of the first computers. Only a little over 100 years have passed since the Lumiere brothers' invention, a negligible instant in history, and we have wrapped the entire planet in wireless internet and created artificial intelligence. How did a biological species, which for thousands of years couldn't invent basic soap and running water, build a digital world in a single century? There is only one answer. This was not a smooth evolution. It was a forced, emergency upload of a new civilizational pattern. The old matrix was folded, the ready-made cities were cleared of their previous inhabitants, and a new incubator generation, stripped of memory, was uploaded into the system for one purpose: to deploy a new technological order as quickly as possible and build the very digital simulation we find ourselves in right now. We were literally thrown into this ready-made, accelerated world at the turn of the century, after the memory of what existed before the start button was pressed had been deleted. We are the children of that emergency upload, and our entire civilization has only existed in its active phase for a very short time. Thank you for being with me on this channel. I wish you the best possible branch of reality. Subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Take care.